how to negotiate for what you want in relationships. So this serves as sort of a part two to our last discussion. If you remember, we were talking about how relationships are by nature transactional. And so how to show up in these relationships and understand what transactions are actually taking place. You have resources, they have resources, but they're these intangible resources, a lot of them. So sometimes we don't realize what it is we're getting or giving out of relationships, but there's always something. So it's important to understand that. So when we say it's transaction, that might sound negative, but it's not a negative thing. By nature, we want something from the people that we have relationships with. There's nothing wrong with that. It's important for us to understand that that exists so that we can avoid being abused, taken advantage of, neglected in our relationships. This is a part of healing. Developing a more mature mindset and going about life with a little bit of a business-like demeanor will allow us to show up as mature, as our best selves, and to be able to get what we need, make sure our needs are being fulfilled in the relationship. So one thing that can help you is to imagine there's a child that you're caring for. In fact, in this case, we'll imagine there's twins. Okay. So let's say there's two twins, two boys that you're caring for, and one of the boys is really mean, and the other boy is really nice. Okay. But you love them both equally. You're caring for them equally. However, the really mean one will actually bully his other brother. Now, how will this nice, innocent brother actually navigate this relationship with his mean, bullying twin? That can be very tough. And we can find ourselves in similar situations in our life where we find ourselves with our counterpart. It could be our parents, it could be our coworkers, it could be our boss. Perhaps it's our wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, where we find ourselves being bullied. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily weaker. You could be the physically stronger one in the relationship, and you're still being bullied because why? The other party in the relationship takes more than they give, and they expect it to just go on that way. The other party in the relationship doesn't have concern for your needs and your wants, and they expect it to just go on that way. And that is essentially the bullying that's happening in many relationships. Of course, it happens faster than we realize. It started out where it seemed like we're going to have a good exchange. I was going to do this for you. You were going to provide this for me. And then over time, it's like they started to pull back on what they were giving, the things that were really important to us. And then they start to continue to demand, maybe even more so, the things that we're giving in the relationship. Sometimes our inclination could be, I have to do more now that this person is starting to slip away, or this person doesn't seem to like me anymore. That's what it can be like to be in a relationship with a narcissist. Covert narcissists will simply make you feel unloved and make you feel like you're no longer living up, so that you're no longer worthy of their love, attention, adulation, or whatever it was they were originally giving. But what they're originally giving was all a manipulation to make you think that you were going to get this big, robust relationship. And that's why they call it love bombing, because they're dropping all of this love and so much abundance on top of you like blanket bombing. And in reality, that's not really who they are. They never intended to be that way, but they have to blame you for the fact that they're going to take away this love now. They have to make you believe that you are the reason why you can't be loved anymore. Does that make sense? When really it's just them. It's just that they're bullies, but they're covert in their bullying style. So maybe you've had a situation like this. And so I want to help you to figure out how to navigate this situation. Now the natural thing to recognize when you realize I have an avoidant partner, they don't provide for my emotional needs, or I have a narcissistic, neglectful, bullying partner, they don't provide for my needs. The natural thing to do is to disconnect. That is the healthy thing to do. It's to say, well, you no longer qualify, sir, ma'am. I'm going to have to disconnect from this relationship. because you're not providing for my needs. That's the healthy thing to do. So my question is, why don't you disconnect? What is taking you so long that you feel like you just cannot break away, go no contact? What is making you keep going back again and again to these people? So what happens to us as trauma survivors is we have fear of being alone. So we feel like, well, if I leave my mom or my dad or my brother or my sister or my cousin or my boyfriend, then I'll have no one. Then I'll be alone. And that fear keeps us stuck. It's a little bit illogical because is that condition of being by yourself actually worse than being abused by the one person you're relying on? Sometimes it could actually be better to be by ourselves, right? But nevertheless, that's one of the fears that keeps us stuck in these relationships. Another one of the things is your low sense of self, your low self-esteem. So if you look to these relationships to indicate to you that you are worthy, then you see how you're susceptible to being caught, to being stuck in this relationship because they're making you feel unworthy. So you keep trying and you keep working and you keep giving because you feel unworthy. So you're like, let me do the most, let me do whatever I can so that I can have that worth again. Because if I'm not a good husband, if I'm not a good wife, if I'm not a good mom, then I'm nothing, that I'm no one. And so we put the other person up on that pedestal. We're deifying them as if they have the ability to assign us our worth. We're making them like a god inadvertently. Sad but true. Often it's dependency. To be honest, we would leave, but we work for them or we live with them. We live in their house. We would leave, but we're depending on them financially or emotionally. We're depending on them, or we're just codependent in general, which means that we believe we're only worth something when we're with someone else and doing something for someone else. We don't see our own worth outside of a relationship, and that can keep us stuck. Is this stuff some of the stuff that's keeping you stuck in these relationships, or that kept you stuck for a long time before you started to heal? For some of us, it's the hope for change. We just keep hanging on, hoping that they're going to get better. Well, maybe they'll change. Well, maybe they'll grow. Well, maybe they'll learn. And so we just stay hanging on to these relationships. And in the meantime, we're just getting abused, getting neglected, not getting what we want, just hoping that it's going to change. Another example would be culture. Well, in our culture, family is everything in our culture. Okay, that's all cultures. You think you're special because you're African, Asian, Latin, European, you know what I'm saying? That's all cultures are find family to be important. So you got this brainwashing going on, like in my culture, we don't leave family or we don't break up marriages. Yeah, that's important for everyone. You still need to recognize if someone is toxic and understand the need to disconnect from a toxic person so that you can actually reach healing and actualization. Sometimes the toxic person is an abuser who systematically has isolated you from all other support sources. So now you don't have close relationships outside of the toxic abuser. This was obviously by design. Don't be surprised if you find yourself in this situation. Just simply observe and change it by reconnecting with the healthy people and the healthy connections that you lost. Sometimes you're staying for children, some other practical reason. But whatever it is that's making you feel stuck, remember the example of caring for these two twin boys. One is a bully, the other is the innocent. The bully actually beats up on his twin. He actually harms him. So every time you send the innocent boy in to go play, the bully beats up on him. And he comes out injured. So let's say you've done everything you could to try to talk to this bully. You've chastised them, you've disciplined them, contacted the guidance counselor, you put them in programs, and as of right now, they still just have not changed. Now, how would you continue to advise the innocent child? Do you think you might say to the innocent child, well, you don't want to be alone, so go on in there and keep playing with your brother who injures you and bullies you because you don't want to just be alone. You don't want to have to play by yourself. Do you think you would advise that to the innocent child under your care? If that seems ridiculous to encourage a child to keep exposing himself to bullying, recognize that that's the same abusive parenting that you've been doing to yourself. And saying, you don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. And then you just keep sending yourself into the bully. Oh, I can handle it. It's okay. I'm used to it. It's not caring for your human. You have a universal responsibility to care for your human. So you advocate and you protect that human. You advocate for it. You don't send it in to the bully, to the neglector. Stop visiting your narcissistic mother who only has negative, harsh things to say to you. Stop. It's not caring for your human. Stop sending in yourself to your abusive boyfriend, abusive girlfriend. Cut it out. Just like you would care for that child and say, hey, I know it's hard sometimes that you're going to have to play alone more often now, but I do advise that you just play by yourself and or with other kids until we can fix this one in here. That's the right mindset. And that's how you should care for yourself. Advise yourself to play alone for a while or with others. Do you think you would advise that innocent boy to go play with his bully of a brother because his worth is dependent on if that bully accepts him? Of course not. That's abusive. You would tell him his worth is dependent on this relationship. Likewise, stop telling yourself that your worth is dependent on this relationship. It's a false belief. Would you tell the innocent boy, would you say, hey, keep playing with your bully. I know he beats up on you and injures you, but you gotta stay hoping for change. You gotta hang in there and just hope that it gets better. Would you say that? And then keep sending him in there to get beat up? Did you keep hope alive? No. You wouldn't keep sending him in there and exposing him to that danger. So stop doing it to yourself and saying, oh, I don't want to give up hope. Give up hope. It is okay. It's okay to give up hope in a person because hope is an energy investment. And just like a financial investment, there's a time to take your losses and walk away. Does that make sense? Just like with financial investing, you have to cut your losses and walk away and say, oh, you know what? I didn't make money on this one. Oh well, and I'm going to walk away now. You have to do that with relationships as well. You have to recognize, oh, I spent 20 years in this relationship and it's not yielding a return. Time to walk away instead of spend another 20 years on this. You wouldn't tell that kid, wouldn't you feel guilty not playing with your bully brother? You wouldn't guilt the child. You wouldn't put the culture on the child. You say, hey, in our culture, we play with our brother, whether our brother bullies us or not. Right? So just like you would advocate for and you would protect the child, advocate for and protect yourself. That's your job. It's your universal responsibility. So how do we get what we want out of relationships? Now, let's say we're not talking about a bully, but we're talking about an actual healthy relationship, a person who's not mean or harsh necessarily to us. How do we make sure that we're getting what we want? Now, again, if we recognize we're with a bully, then we may just need to leave. But we need to learn the skills of negotiating for what we want in relationships. And the biggest thing is getting past our own mental blocks that are keeping us from negotiating for what we want in relationships. And one of the biggest mental blocks is the fear of conflict, the fear of confrontation. Okay? So why do you fear confrontation? As a trauma survivor, you're afraid of rejection, right? You prefer harmony. I just want to keep the peace. I just want to keep the peace. Or you have insecurities, or you're sensitive to correction and criticism, so you don't want to have a confrontation for that reason. Or you don't have assertiveness skills, or it's culture, you know, in your culture, you just leave things be, you don't talk about things, right? Maybe you're just afraid of the consequences of speaking up to your boss, someone who has power. So what's stopping you from having a confrontation? Why do you fear confrontation? Why do you fear conflict? Well, let me help you to address this concern. You you may not have ever actually had a healthy relationship. But if you did, you would realize that all healthy relationships require conflict. Confrontation is not bad for healthy relationships. Confrontation is good for healthy relationships. Confrontation is healthy in a relationship. Write that down. Confrontation is healthy for relationships. Why is confrontation healthy for a relationship? Why is conflict good in a relationship? Well, for one, it forces the other person to see you. Correct. It opens communication. It fosters progress. Correct. For one thing that confrontation does in a relationship is it forces the other person to see you. Now, how important is that? This is what you've been missing up until this point. Because you avoid confrontation, the other people can't see you. And then you end up resenting them for using you, abusing you, taking advantage of you, abandoning you, and so on. They're not meeting your needs because you don't advocate for your needs, because that would require confrontation. The very nature of asserting yourself is requiring confrontation. That's what it does. It is a conflict. So don't be afraid of confrontation. Recognize that it is natural and it is a necessary part of every relationship. Change your mindset on confrontation right now. I appreciate confrontation. I respect confrontation, and I understand that this is necessary for my relationship to be healthy. With your employees, stop running away from confrontation. With your boss, stop running away from confrontation. With your husband, your wife, your brother, your sister, the confrontation is how the other person sees you. Also, it's how you see the other person, because you may think you understand and know what they want, but until you have the confrontation, you don't necessarily know. Until you start hearing their expressions and seeing what it is they're saying is important to them. And then you see how you can meet their needs better. So confrontation is healthy because it's allowing them to see you and you to see them as well. For an example, a husband comes in and he doesn't kiss his wife. He's been doing this for months, and his wife is really starting to get resentful. What is this about? You come in the house and you don't kiss me? I'm home every time you come home. You don't kiss me. Well, without confrontation, this can go on for years, right? And she can have all this bitterness and resentment. And eventually she can file for divorce because she just feels like he doesn't love me anymore. She starts being mean to him. He sees the meanness. He doesn't confront her. And he feels like she doesn't love me anymore. And then the relationship breaks up. Sadly, this is real. Like, this really happens. But guess what? With a little confrontation, these two people could save their marriage. If she steps up to the plate and says, Mr. Sir, husband, I need to have a conversation with you. She gets her notebook and she gets her pen and she writes at the top of her page, She says, "You don't kiss me." So she wants to remember what she's here to talk about. And then she is assertive and says, "You know what? You come home, you don't kiss me, and it's tearing me apart. I mean, it absolutely makes me feel awful." And then the husband says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's my fault. The reason I don't kiss you is because I feel like I stink when I come home from work. I work really hard. I can smell myself in the car. I don't want you to not love me anymore and not find me attractive. So that's why I always just do a beeline for the shower when I come in. It's just insecurity." To that, the wife may say, "Oh, so it doesn't have anything to do with me?" And he goes, "No, not at all. I love you. That's why I don't want to kiss you because I don't want you to stop loving me." And then they realize it's all going to be okay. And they both agree that he should just take a shower first or that he should just be smelly and kiss her first. Right. Then she comes to the table, negotiates for her needs. And guess what happens? The confrontation is healthy for the relationship. This is what you're missing out on because you're afraid of rejection and you want to keep the peace and you're insecure and you don't have the skills. This is what you're missing out on by fleeing from confrontation. Confrontation is good for a relationship. When you have the skills, you can deepen intimacy in your relationship. You can prevent breakup. You can prevent resentment. You can improve your communication skills and your assertiveness skills. You can establish boundaries, and you can quell misunderstandings. So again, I need you to drill this. Confrontation is a healthy part of relationships. It's a healthy part. So we need some confrontation. Okay. You don't need to start fights all the time, but you need to come to the table to discuss stuff sometimes. Okay. So pick your battles and decide when it's important to you and come forward from now on. This is a part of negotiating for what you need and what you want in relationships. Now, as far as the nitty gritty of navigating the negotiation, I'll give you some tips now. But in order to really understand how to be a good negotiator in a relationship, to get what you want, and also to make sure that the other party is really getting what they need, you'll want to tap into my Skills of Assertiveness videos on YouTube, in the healing course, and or in my book, Relationship Tools, is the chapter right after relationships. In the book Mind by Roman Zanoni on Amazon, you can get that. Okay, you can also find that on the website. You want to find these skills. Again, you can get them in the healing course, which you can sign up for on my website, or in the book, The Skills of Assertiveness, because it does take skill to actually negotiate rather than have an argument. There is no place for you to fight with your mate. I would never advocate for you to fight. But you need to be having a lot of discussions. A lot of discussions. So when I say fighting, that's raising the voice, calling names, getting angry. None of that. None of that is acceptable. Being obstinate, not listening to one another, none of that is acceptable. Leave all that behind. But when you have the skills of negotiation, one of your first tips is to remove the emotion from the discussion. So you're going to take emotion, you're going to turn the volume on your emotion down to like 0.1. So there's very little emotion. And you're going to do it as an intellectual exercise, like you're in a college discussion. That's how you should approach it, even though you could be talking about your feelings. So it's, hey, I feel really bad when you come in the house, but you're not being emotional about it because all the crying and the theatrics is not helping to negotiate for your position. Yelling, not helping. Showing anger, never appropriate in a peaceful relationship. Never appropriate in a healthy relationship. No. What we need is calm discussion, which is just like what you see me doing right here. This is calm discussion. My emotions are turned down to like a 1, right? And I'm just talking to you, giving you point by point by point what it is. When they make a point or have something to say, take it, you write it down in your trusty notebook. Mhm. Don't say anything because you can't talk while someone else is talking. Now you're in an argument if you're talking over each other. Don't do that. Absorb. Then use this phrase. What I hear you saying is, and then try to repeat it back in your own words. Believe me, they'll appreciate it. I sure appreciate it if someone says to me, hey, what I hear you saying is, and they try to repeat it back. That shows that they're listening. So this is a skill that you use. What I hear you saying is this and that, right? If it gets off subject, then you let the person know that sounds very important. I wrote it down. We'll have to address this at a later time. Today, we're here to discuss why you don't kiss me when you walk in the house. That's why you have the notebook, keeps you on track, right? It also helps you to not blurt out what you want to say or forget what you want to say, and that's what you're writing down. While they're talking, you're writing down maybe a point that you want to make. And that keeps things organized in the discussion. So nobody's talking over one another. Does that make sense? You can also use the term nevertheless, right? So you say to your kid, I need you to take out the garbage. And they say, I took out the garbage last time. And you say, nevertheless, I need you to take out the garbage. Nevertheless is a nice segue around all of the nonsense that people like to throw in our way so that we can get back to the point. So we can use this at work. Say, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to continue to take notes at the meetings. Seems like that's always just falling on me, and it's getting in the way of my ability to do my job. And your boss goes, well, if you don't take notes, no one's going to be able to take notes. I need someone to do it, and you're the person I trust. And then you say, I appreciate that. Nevertheless, I'm not going to be able to continue to take notes at the meeting because it's getting in the way of my job. You understand? So nevertheless is the segue to get you back on track to establishing your point. The discussion is not over until the original point is resolved. When the original point is resolved, the discussion is over. You can start a new discussion then at any time, including right away, about the next point that the other person wanted to talk about. Does that make sense? This takes skill. This takes skill. To avoid getting drawn into the muck of an argument, it takes skill. How are you going to build these skills outside of watching my videos? How are you going to build these skills outside of taking the healing course, outside of reading my book? How are you going to build these skills? Practice. Yes, you're correct, Jojo. We got to practice. It takes practice in real life to build the skills. It takes practice. So how are you going to get the practice? By no longer avoiding confrontation. So stop running away from important discussions. Okay? Create the confrontation. How do you know when to do it? When you're feeling uncomfortable, you're going to meditate on that feeling, analyze, is it something that you need to discuss? Write it down on a piece of paper and confront if necessary. If it's not something you can let go. Make sense? Through the confrontation, you're practicing your skills. Okay, I'm not emotional. Bam, I'm writing things down. I'm staying on the point. You practice your skills. Soon, you become a ninja at this. And you're wanting to make sure that they're getting their needs met too. But you come to the table and you advocate for yourself. You advocate for your needs. That's your job. Does that make sense?